Today's topic is about internationalisation of higher education. So, in thinking about what internationalisation is, one of the most popular definitions was put together by Jane Knight: the process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, functions, or delivery of post-secondary education, meaning higher education. So Knight's concept has been used in so many articles, people writing about internationalisation and defining what internationalisation is. Hans de Witt, he actually built on Knight's definition. So the parts I've highlighted on this slide are the additional words that he put into Knight's original definition to clarify it a bit further. So he added the word intentional, which is interesting. So it's an intentional process. It's not just a process that just happens without us making it happen, but it should be something that's intentional. And he also added this sentence at the end: in order to enhance the quality of education and research for all students and staff, and to make a meaningful contribution to society. De Witt also mentions that it should be about enhancing the quality of education. So a lot of questions have been raised around why do we internationalise? What's the purpose? If it's not contributing to enhancing the quality of education, then why do it? So he's emphasised this in his definition. The other point is that staff and students should make a meaningful contribution to society, which highlights that internationalisation should not only be about the economic rationales. So it's not just about benefiting society economically, but much more than that. Okay, so there's been lots of definitions about internationalisation of education, and these are some examples here from different authors. So if we look at the first definition there's a concept known as comprehensive internationalisation, and Hudzig said it's about infusing international and comparative perspectives through teaching and research. The second one focuses on activities. So thinking about maybe activities that can be designed to help individuals understand the global environment in which they live and communicate across borders. The third one is a little bit similar to Knight's definition, about integrating an international purpose into teaching and research and service aspects of higher education. And again, this idea that the vision not only involves top administrators, but motivates all persons in academia to think globally, comparatively, and collaboratively in this dynamic and diverse world. So it involves lots of people at different levels thinking about how to make this process happen. And I thought this was quite an interesting definition that one member of staff at another university, not at Bath, mentioned. So she said, internationalisation and how it affects us means we need to adjust and transform our programmes so that they work for international students. And part of that is about content, curriculum, pedagogy, organisation of the course, what we're providing, assignments, how assessment is done and when it is done, things about bringing people together as a cohort and as a group. All those become quite challenging, but I do think it is an opportunity for improving things. So that is some of the ways that we talk about internationalisation. And another way is marketing, try and get more international students. So another important thing to think about is the difference between globalisation and internationalisation. It can be quite difficult to think about how do these two concepts differ and how do they overlap, because they clearly have a connection. So Altbach and Knight differentiate between globalisation and internationalisation. They see globalisation as the context of the 21st century economic and academic and global trends. Okay, so they see it as a trend or as a movement that's happening in the world, whereas internationalisation is seen as a response to globalisation. So because globalisation is happening, it's having an effect on education, and education is internationalising because of globalisation. And they define globalisation as thinking about worldwide markets, productivity, competitiveness to knowledge generation. Knight also talks about 4 key rationales behind internationalization, and she groups them as economic, academic, political, and social cultural. Of course, it's like any concept, it's an evolving concept, and there's many interpretations, there's many rationales. So it's always important to know what context you're talking about. And I just want to take really the first 2 rationales. So thinking about the economic and academic. So these are the aspects that have interested me in particular. So the economic rationale has also been referred to as being in line with what we call instrumentalist practices. So kind of having a reason that's linked to the economic rationale. So these have been dominated by neoliberal economic objectives that are linked to the employability agenda. So the economic rationale is that internationalization is linked to the employability agenda as well, because it's another way of developing skills that will be useful for working in a global internationalized world. Universities are being driven by competition, partly to raise their financial, academic and international prestige and profile. So we've looked a bit about the economic rationale. There's this educational rationale as well. There are increasingly scholars who recognize that the focus of internationalization needs to be more on the educationalist approach rather than on this economic approach, and that these approaches recognize the personal and societal value of learning in itself and involve analyzing one's actions and perspectives, self-reflection, leading to greater self-understanding and understanding of others. So it's this idea about, it comes back really to the question of what is education and what is education for, and about developing the whole person. Woodin, Lundgren and Castro talk about an intercultural dialogue approach to internationalization. So this is, well, I suppose a fairly new concept that they've come up with. And they base this on the concept of intercultural dialogue, which is defined by the Council of Europe. And they've done a lot of work on intercultural dialogue as well. And they define intercultural dialogue as a deeper understanding of diverse worldviews and practices, cooperation and participation, personal growth, transformation, and tolerance and respect for the other. These authors argue that this is the kind of approach that should be taken in thinking about internationalization. So it's about a commitment to a process whose underlying values are respect, equality, and tolerance, that recognizes the importance of understanding oneself and others, so important about cultural identity, etc., through open and respectful exchange. So that's touching on Media's idea about exchanges through diverse groups of people, and the value of diversity in self-development and transformation. So all these ideas are in line with this idea of an educationalist approach to internationalization. This is an interesting quote by one of the vice chancellors of a university. He said the main benefits of so he says globalization of higher education, but really you should be saying internationalization if we define it in the way I mentioned before, are not financial, as valuable as that might be, but intellectual and cultural. So the coming together of people from different parts of the world to study has the potential to form creative global communities that learn to interact and collaborate in new and previously incomprehensible ways, such is the dynamism of life in the global village. Thinking about all that, given that there's so many definitions of internationalization, so many understandings, not only of what it is, but what it should be and how it should be approached, you can imagine that there's lots of different types of strategies around internationalization. So that kind of top one really that has been focused on, although we're questioning this, is the increasing international student recruitment. And other areas have focused on international partnerships, especially when you're thinking about research. So research is a very important aspect of a university. Another thing that's been monitored and thought about is international ranking systems. So where does the university appear in various ranking systems? So focusing again on competition and how do we get our university higher up the table? Student mobility, another huge one. So through various programs, so at the EU level, there's the Erasmus program, where students in the EU get to go and spend a period of time, normally half a year or a year even, in another country. But there's also student mobility in the sense of moving to another country to do your studies. And that kind of feeds into this idea of transnational education, where we talked about different campuses as well in different countries. And this focus on equipping students with particular skills, knowledge and competencies to be able to compete in a globalizing labour market and society. So again, that's coming into the employability agenda as well. And there's various approaches to internationalisation that have been taken. DeWitt has summarised them into 4 main approaches. So approaching internationalisation through activities, so an activity approach. So that might be extracurricular or within the curriculum. The rationale approach, so thinking about what the purposes and intended outcomes of internationalisation should be. A competency approach, so thinking about the kinds of knowledge and skills that need to be learnt for global transnational future. And also a general process approach. So we've seen a lot in the definitions this idea of internationalisation being a process where all of these different things are combined. So yes, we think about activities, but we also think about what about international policies? What about international procedures? What about having a proper international strategy in place? And DeWitt argues this is the most comprehensive and holistic approach. So considering it from various levels of higher education, not just, a simple sort of activity approach in the classroom, for example. There's also different forms of internationalisation. So we've talked about gaining an international experience through, for example, student and faculty exchanges or study abroad, internships or service learning or technical training, globalised or internationalised curricula on the home campus. So that's about internationalising the actual curriculum at home, on the home campus. Foreign language education as well, area or cultural studies, programs that promote international or comparative education. So IEG maybe could be argued as some kind of, in this area. There's also other programs. For example, for my master's degree, I did a master's in comparative and international education at the University of Oxford. Internationalised co-curricular units and activities. We've already mentioned offshore campuses, such as the ones Nottingham have, and international delivery of education. And this idea of a borderless flow of knowledge and ideas. So there's various forms that internationalisation can take. And in the literature, internationalisation has also been divided into different areas. So one area is thinking about internationalisation at home. This is actually a concept in itself. And this is seen as one stream of the internationalisation process that aims to enable all staff and students, and not just international students, to operate in international and increasingly multicultural domestic contexts. There's also this concept that's linked to internationalisation at home, which is internationalisation of the curriculum. Again, this is another stream of internationalisation process that aims to enable, again, all students and staff, not just international students. So that's the similar quote, to operate in international and increasingly multicultural domestic contexts. And crucial to this concept of internationalisation at home is the internationalisation of the curriculum, which is defined by Betty Leask, as the incorporation of international, intercultural and or global dimensions into the content of the curriculum. So you can see there, I guess, that this definition is quite similar to Knight's definition of the internationalisation of higher education, but the difference is that it focuses much more on the curriculum itself and the content of the curriculum. And Leask's definition of internationalisation of the curriculum implies several things. So it implies engaging students with internationally informed research and cultural and linguistic diversity, purposefully developing students' international and intercultural perspectives. It also implies moving beyond traditional boundaries and dominant paradigms, preparing students to deal with uncertainty by opening up their minds and developing their ability to think, both creatively and critically, and being supported by services focused on the development of intercultural competence and international perspectives. Thinking about internationalised curriculum as being the integration into the curriculum of content that uses knowledge about other nations, I guess you could say other countries, other cultures as well, uses knowledge, perspectives or epistemologies derived in or from other nations. So this is the first time we've actually seen this idea that internationalisation is more than international students coming to a Western civilization and learning the Western knowledge. And then this other one, curricula, pedagogies and assessments that foster understanding of global perspectives and how these interact with the local and the personal. So there's various challenges. Okay, we have the curriculum content as a challenge. Which context should we cover? What values should we be including? Even when we think about the processes of teaching, learning and assessment. Okay, what should we be focusing on? What types of pedagogy should we be using? If developing intercultural competence is an important aspect for developing that in students, then should we be looking at our pedagogy and thinking about ways in which intercultural competence can be developed? So if we have a classroom, for example, which often happens at Bath, which, well, actually this year our IEG course is a little bit more diverse than usual. So in the past, it's been heavily Chinese students. And in order to cater more to the fact that these students were Chinese, there's all kinds of questions. Do we draw our examples when we're teaching from China? Or do we draw them from the UK? Or to what extent do the students in our classrooms want to learn about examples from their own countries or from other parts of the world? And again, what kind of skills and competencies do students and staff require for life and work in a diverse world? So there's lots of challenges. Internationalising the experience of the international student in the host institution, internationalising the experience of local students, addressing challenges within classroom diversity, how to think about innovative teaching with intercultural groups, developing inclusive practices so that the students in the classroom can interact with each other and thinking about different styles of participation. Also thinking about innovative uses of technology to enhance learning and promote internationalisation. And one thing that I've mentioned already but is seen as by some as important is this idea of developing intercultural competence, which Deardorff has defined as the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural situations based on one's intercultural knowledge, skills and attitudes. So this can be seen as an important part of intercultural learning, and there's many models that have been developed about how to develop international competence. So I've mentioned this idea of the internationalised intercultural self. Self-reflection is a really important part of this, both for learners and for educators. We need to be thinking about how do learners engage with otherness, with cultural others. What is the nature of their intercultural interactions with each other? Are they positive? Are they negative? Are they learning from these experiences? How do they understand their own and others' identities and how these interact with each other? And how are they developing their intercultural competence? So this is really about staff taking responsibility for taking an intercultural stance. And again, the importance of self-reflection to develop an internationalised personal and professional outlook. And Sanderson says teachers, as individuals, must operate from a base that extends beyond local and national perspectives. They themselves have to be among the cosmopolitans of the 21st century. This is just raising the question about why is an internationalised curriculum important? What is the aim? What should it enable people to do? This is just one example. So you could say, well, to create global, internationally minded or intercultural or cosmopolitan citizens who are capable of thriving in a complex and diverse world. So just to finish off, we see that internationalisation is high on the policy agenda of universities, and it has been for some time. but it's understood, interpreted, and valued differently in different countries and in different parts of the world.